Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, derbyologist, and joining me again on the show is Capping with Candace here. Candace, this week we've got a big week lined up for Derby preps. And first, let's take a look back. Last week was the Robert B. Lewis Stakes, and we saw More Spirit pick up the victory.
We did. I know you and I were against him from a betting perspective because he was going to be very short, and we perhaps saw I Will Score being in here as lone speed, and he was. That was the case that, certainly formulated. It just seemed like I Will Score didn't stay the trip, and that ultimately resulted in him getting a pretty, a third place. It was pretty much the three of them, More Spirit, Uncle Lino, I Will Score, and then everyone else was a fair ways back, but I thought More Spirit ran a really nice race. It wasn't anything that was overly flashy, but he got the job done. And at this point on the trail, February, that's what you're looking for. Is you're looking for a horse who's gonna get the job done and move on to the next round, perhaps. So he certainly seems to be the class of California at this point. If you say Nyquist goes Florida. So, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him, but you have to think Santa Anita Derby's the next kind of race that he'd be targeting.
Yeah, it was an impressive win. I mean, you had I Will Score and Uncle Lino kind of battling just off one another in the pace scenario, and the fact that More Spirit was able to lay close and got the wider trip of the three, I think it proved he was probably definitely best in that race. I still don't necessarily want to give up on I Will Score and Uncle Lino just because I think More Spirit may have ran a pretty good race, and I Will Score. It's always tough in your first route race, and he was the lone speed, but he got pressured the whole time from Uncle Lino. I think if Uncle Lino doesn't run in that race could have unfolded a lot different, but it is what it is. I think I Will Score still has some upside, but now he's only got 30 days to really decide where he wants to go and what he wants to do. But I wouldn't necessarily say off that one race that you can totally judge that he can't route, because it was his first route. And it was his first loss. So, I mean, More Spirit has lost twice. So, I mean, I think sometimes people forget until you lose and you kind of face different scenarios. That was I Will Score's first test. And I thought Uncle Lino had an even, tougher trip because he had to chase I Will Score. And then he was kind of hounded on the outside by More Spirit. So I think the three of them were pretty good. And I think, they'll probably all stay in California, but we'll see if they try to hit both preps, the San Felipe and the Santa Anita Derby, or if they just move on and kind of split up and divide and conquer. So I thought it was a good, solid prep. This week we go to Tampa, and it's the Sam F. Davis. There's no Kentucky Derby points, but a lot of times this is a good prep for the couple of different options it gives. Sometimes horses will go up to the Gotham, and then sometimes horses will stay down there for the Tampa Bay Derby. It's a small field, but I think the top three, again, are kind of clearly above the rest.
That certainly seems to be the case to me. It's a really intriguing field because you have, your Pletcher, you have, some of your really well-bred types. Then you have a few types in here who are just kind of fast. My top choice in here is going to be Morning Fire. I just think he's lone speed in this spot. The next speed in this race is Awesome Slate, and he easily cleared him last time out here locally at Tampa. We've talked before about being wary of Parks for him, but for him to replicate his performances here locally has to be an encouraging sign for him going into this race. A mile on the 16th might be a little bit iffy for him, but there are reasons to believe that he should be able to stay this trip, particularly if he's alone on the front end. So I'm going to go with him in this spot. It's a complete pace play for me. But I will say that if you're looking, the player exactus, the player tries, or whatnot, the horse whom I would say would be the most likely to maybe catch him if he's kind of running on fumes in the last little bit of this race would be Rafting. He's by Tapit, trained by Graham Motion. I know the motion bar isn't necessarily firing at all cylinders at this point, but Rafting, I think of these, has the most reason to believe that he'll stay this trip very well. There's a lot of stamina influences in his pedigree, and he's done well in Florida, and it's interesting to me that they even started him on turf. It wasn't ultimately successful, but part of them had to think that maybe he's a horse who needs these routes, or could maybe down the line have some success on the turf, and those types tend to do well at Tampa on the dirt surface to begin with. So I'm gonna take Morning Fire to win, but I would certainly use Rafting underneath.
Yeah, I narrowed it down pretty quickly actually to Rafting, Gettysburg, and then Destin. Destin ran last time at the fairgrounds and ran evenly against, I think, at least equivalent to this group of horses. And I thought he kind of the worst end of the trip of the top 3, 4 horses maybe in that race. Rafting has definitely been on my radar ever since his maiden breaker last summer. Really like the fact they went down to Florida, got the win, and then they just decided to just rest him up and kind of work him out long workouts. I think they're expecting big things from this horse. I'm going to go with Rafting to win, but Gettysburg really improved. And a lot of times I've mentioned before that third lifetime race. And it just seems like the clock might have went on the last time for Gettysburg. He may be the now horse because I think he can maybe pressure Morning Fire a little bit on the front end.
Perhaps. I'm not sure he's quite fast enough, but he'll be there in that first flight. I think he's a very interesting horse to me in that he's kind of everything that Fletcher horses aren't. I mean, he did nothing first time out. Second time out he hit the lead and croaked. And then, like you say, he really improved thirds, in his third start, getting that longer extended trip. Um, I don't quite know what to make of him. So like I say, he's not typically what you see from Fletcher horses. He reminds me almost a little bit of Royal Sun last year, and that's maybe not a good sign. So I think the jury's out on him a little bit as to how good he really is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we really know, but I think, this is a case where you got some black type potential, and it only came up with 7 horses where
Yes.
it looks like we could have 14 in the Risen Star and 15 in the Southwest, I guess, to finish in the top 3 and then decide where you want to go. I'm not giving up on Destin yet. I mean, they're not treating him like the breeding that he has, which is kind of surprising. They kind of seem to be throwing him into races, but that first race he actually did get a little bit of trouble and really galloped out nice. Find it very interesting that Velasquez comes in to ride Destin and Castellano comes in to ride Gettysburg. I just can't imagine those 2 guys. They're going to get beat by the local jock, and I think Gettysburg may be the front runner. I think Rafting's going to get a good trip, and I think long-term Rafting has the most potential. I'm going with Rafting, but Gettysburg is very intriguing in this spot just because I think he may be hitting his stride right now.
Yeah, I see Rafting the same way as you, even though I'm not picking him to win here. Like you say, he's the one to me who has the most, perhaps, Derby potential, and that you think he really wants these extended trips. He seems, when you watch him, to have more improvement left in him. So, we talk about it at this time of the year. Who do you think is going to win now, and who do you think is a Derby horse? And they're not necessarily the same thing, which is why, for me, I like Rafting. I pick him underneath, but I don't necessarily think he wins. But in a month, he might be the completely best horse out of this race.
What a Wonderful World has won 3 in a row, and he ran 3 races on the turf and then ran on the synthetic. One thing I like about this guy is he's faced a 12-horse field and then 2 10-horse fields. I think, and he seems to kind of have a pressing running style. Unless he can't run on the dirt at all, I don't think he's a complete toss here.
Probably not. It's going to be interesting to see where he sits in the running. Turf races and synthetic races typically just aren't run with as much speed as dirt races. So even if you have a horse who does tend to sit forward like he does, that might be mid-pack or the back here, depending on how fast that they really do go out front. The Cassie Brown has been struggling a little bit as of late. I'm a little bit confused as to why this horse is here. I would have expected a horse like this to show up in the El Camino Real, but maybe you just didn't want to ship and you knew this spot was going to come up weak, and if so, more power to you if you can run well. And that maybe that's the case for all the horses in this race. Is they, the trainers and the connections did a good job of picking a spot because, geez, there's allowance races at Gulfstream that are harder than this.
What's interesting is Tampa's having a pretty big card on Saturday. So all the jocks are into ride. Rafting gets Edward Prado, and actually a big jockey switch. I was wondering if you thought anything about Awesome Slate going to Julian Leparoux this time around, the pride of Northland Park, Canada.
It's going to be interesting. I'm not, Julien Leparoux is a very good jockey in, the situations where he rides best. He's very good on hold-up horses in particular. So it's going to be interesting to see how he goes with Awesome Slate because while he's a very good jockey in his own right, I'm not sure this is the kind of horse who necessarily complements his style particularly well.
Now we go out west, the El Camino Real, and this one drew a full field. And traditionally these synthetic races, I mean, I assume we'll get a 14-horse field for the Spiral later on this spring.
Yes.
And it just seems like you throw in the turf horses and you throw in some slower horses that maybe can sprint a little bit. And I think it's a good addition to the El Camino Real. And you have to at least like the fact that it's got 12, 13 horses and still a potential of some horses to step up a little bit.
Absolutely. Like you say, the synthetic races on the Derby Trail tend to get massive fields, and everyone kind of getting their one correct to try to get points to get in for horses who've been running on the turf for the most part. Maybe I'll start with a horse who I don't like, and that's Oscar Dominguez. He comes in here for Paddy Gallagher, who typically does extremely well with first-time starters in North America, but I think there's lots of reasons to be against this horse, and I have a feeling he might take some money. He comes in here being formerly with Aidan O'Brien. Typically, I don't like to bet former O'Brien horses anywhere in the world because the feeling is that he gets everything out of his horses. So, one, you think the tank might be drained a little bit, and two, you don't usually think that horses, are taken out of his stable unless they just aren't that good. I also don't like the fact that he was gelded after his first start with O'Brien. That's not something that they do a lot, so the fact that he was gelded, again, just it's a signs to me that, he wasn't quite showing the potential that they hoped from him and perhaps was very disappointing. So he's one that I think potentially at a short price is one who I certainly wouldn't be playing in this sort of a spot. These races tend to be run, slowish, very bunched up fields, and usually it's the horse who has the best turn of foot and stamina who wins this race, and the same kind of ends up being the case for the Spiral. I landed on a horse here for Grand Motion named Tusk. He's by Tappet, and he's out of It's Midnight, who's a Charmadel mare. He's never ran on synthetic, but Motion does have a good record switching his turf horses over to the surface. And Charmadel is a fantastic all-weather sire, one of the top 10 in Europe every single year as far as his all-weather progeny go. So I like that influence in the breeding. This is a horse who has decent form. I don't think that he's, been running down the barn, but, he comes in having run against some good company. He has the right style for this kind of race, and I do think that he is one who really needs the 9 furlongs, more so than some of these others who have maybe been winning races but are really just milers. I think he needs this extended trip a little bit more. I like that he has a local jockey aboard, because I do think, again, this surface can be a little bit tricky as far as tactics go, so I like a jockey that has experience over it versus some of these others who are coming in from California or from other locations who don't have, necessarily the experience riding over the surface. And, he comes in here on a really quick turnaround, and I like that. That's something that Motion doesn't do too terribly often, but when he does, for the most part, he's fairly successful, especially at just getting these horses in the money. And I think this horse is pretty well meant. I don't think he'd, on a quick turnaround, just throw this horse in here, especially for Flaxman Holdings, who, are very, very good owners. This is homebred for them. So I'm going to go with Tusk. I just think he checks a lot of the boxes in here.
Yeah, I think, this race, Frank Conversation is the favorite. I think he was ambitiously placed a couple of races back, and then when he had a little drop in class, he picked up a nice win. But he kind of has a style that's going to see him kind of bunched with a bunch of these horses on the turn. And like you say, I just don't know if that can win a 6 and a 7 horse field or be competitive, but I'm not so sure. I think he's going to get swallowed up by some just horses that are going to stalk, and then I think they're faster than him. I really took a long look at Tusk. This is one of the few races, the El Camino Real, that year after year has a pattern. It's usually won by a Southern California turf horse. So that made me want to go to Tusk. The other pattern is just a horse from Southern California. And so I've really been high on this horse all along. I'm just going to take Mr. Coker. I like his company lines. Really love his last workout. And I think Hollendorfer is getting pretty aggressive here, putting this horse in this race. It may be too much too soon, but I do think he'll be 6 or 7 to 1, just because people are going to say he just broke his maiden. And I think, some of these horses ain't that great. And I just think he has a shot, and I really like this horse. I think this is an aggressive move by Hollendorfer.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw him in the spot. He, of course, ran extremely well, went second to Dancing Candy in their maiden special weight. Dancing Candy has since flouted that form. He came right back out to win and break his maiden very well at Santa Anita last month of January. I'm not sure stylistically that he's the right horse, but you know that Hollendorfers do well at Golden Gate, so he knows better than me. He is by Candy Rides, so there's potential there for the synthetic surface. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does because, like you say, he is one that if he were the one to win this, he's legitimate, very legitimate Derby potential right there. More so than the rest of these.
Yeah, I mean, that's my thought. He is a candy ride that should like the synthetic. It's an aggressive move by Hollendorfer, but this owner's had horses on the trail before. And I'm just wondering, I think when Danzig Candy won last week, Hollendorfer said, well, I just got beat by a monster in my debut. He's shown some kind of weird, quirky things in both of his races, but a candy ride on the synthetic, that Newfoundland was an expensive horse trained by Todd Pletcher that won a couple of races at the end of his career. I think that's got some synthetic. And this horse is interesting. If he wins this race, he's got legitimate potential. The rest of them, I think, might just be relegated to going to the spiral and try to complete that double. But I think Mr. Coker is a horse that could be seriously well meant. And it's not easy to stretch out, as we saw last week with I Will Score, and go to the synthetic. But maybe if you get 6 or 7 to 1, which I can't believe coming off a maiden win in a 13, 14 horse field, I can't believe he's not 6 or 7 to 1.
Yeah, you think it's going to be a prize. I think conversation's going to go very short here. I think a horse like Oscar Dominguez will take money. I think a horse like, we haven't talked about, but like Cassiopeia, who comes in here for Grand Motion, took a lot of money in the Gray Stakes, finished second, third to Riker. I think that's a horse who could take a fair amount of money too. So I think, for both of ours, for Tusk and for Mr. Coker, you should be looking at, decent enough prices.
We're recording this on a Wednesday night. Southwest Stakes is Monday, so they haven't officially drawn. It's expected to be a 13 or 14 horse field possibly. And we won't actually make an official prediction, but I think there's a couple of horses each of us have got our eyes on. So maybe just talk about a couple of horses you'll be looking at, and of course without post positions. And I feel for the horse that's going to get stuck in 13 or 14 here.
Definitely, yeah. If you're drawn out wide here, you're probably in big trouble. But I mean, there's a few coming back from the Smarty Jones. I think, want to see how St. Perini does here. I want to see the Asmussen horse, Luna DeLoco. That was a horse who I think, down the line has some potential still left in him. See if he can maybe improve on his fourth place finish last time out in the Smarty Jones. Whitmore was the one who avoided this bunch last time out, running in the allowance race, which looked like a genius move with how easy he went and how messy this Smarty Jones turned to be. Want to see him in here in this race to see how he does. Or if you go back to his, he ran in the Delta Jackpot, of course, and was fifth behind Exaggerator, Sunny Ridge, horses who have since franked the form very well. So I think there's some depth to this field. I think what I'm struggling with in Arkansas right now is I'm not sure there's a superstar. I think there might be more depth there than any of the other locations, but are they all G3 horses? That's my concern.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely looking forward to Whitmore. I love the sprint prep, and I thought he ran okay in the Delta Jackpot. I think he has some distance breeding and really seems to be working well. I thought the best horse in the Remington Park Springboard Mile was Sudden Breaking News. And I think with Collected coming in for Baffert, he's guaranteed to be the favorite just because what they did with Toes on Ice in the last time. And Discreetness has won 2 in a row, so I think those are your 2 favorites. So I'm looking forward to Sudden Breaking News and Whitmore. I think it says a lot about this field if Collected comes in and wins. I'm fully expecting him to get trounced again here, and I think he's going to be 3 to 5 again. I think all these stats are worthless. Baffert threw all those horses in all those years that couldn't lose, and now people are going, oh, he's 19 for 20 at Oaklawn. Well, he's 19 for 20 with horses that couldn't lose, and I don't think he's sending the first string there this year.
No, I mean, it doesn't seem like he has a lot of talent to begin with. And, it's really kind of just more spirit. I know he just got Malibu Sunset, but he hasn't ran him yet. He just got him from Fairgrounds. But it's like them and everybody else. They aren't that good. So I'm not that threatened by them, really.
Yeah, I think Collected's going to take a lot of money, and people are going to spout off a lot of those Baffert stats. And I just think this, I look at stats all day long, and I think it's just a case where the numbers lie. I mean, in this case, he's not sending the first stringers. And like I say, this says a lot about those Oaklawn horses if Collected is able to come there and steal a $500,000 purse. And I really think that's what Baffert's doing. Baffert's sending Collected there because he knows how good Collected is, and he just wants to get a gauge on the rest of those Oaklawn horses, and I think that's what he's doing. So should be a good race. Hopefully the weather cooperates. In some years we seem to have had rain on that Monday, if I remember right. So we'll see how that works out. Off the track this week, what is your topic?
For me, I wanted to talk about Songbird. She won very well last week, and it seems like people are really, one way or the other on her going to the Derby. Connections, Fox Hill Farms have already said that she's not going to go. They have no plans to run her against the boys, and that's made a lot of people really angry because they see her as maybe being the best horse, male or female, in this entire crop, and they don't understand why they wouldn't challenge her and put her into the Derby. Of course, these are the same connections of 8 Bells, who we had that tragic accident in the Derby, so you can see why they'd maybe be a little bit tentative to put another filly against the boys in that race in particular. But for me, aside from all of that, I don't see the logic in putting her in the Derby anyway. I think people just want her to go there because they think that she's good, but they aren't actually analyzing the race. I mean, Songbird to me is a horse who, she has so much front-end speed. She wins races off of going to the front, being faster than everybody else, and just maintaining that speed all the way around the track. The Derby literally is the one race a year where it's extremely difficult for a front runner to get an uncontested lead. So even if you had the plans to run her against the boys, why on earth would you do it in that race? Like literally the one race that you know probably won't be run to suit.
Well, the last couple of years, though, we've had slower paces, and I think that's because we don't get the sprinters in there anymore. So I think that theory's kind of shot out the window. For a lot of years, we did have fast paces, but I don't know, after the last 2 years, I just can't imagine a scenario where we get extremely fast paces.
But do you think she'd be uncontested on the front end? I guess that's my thinking, is that...
Well, it depends on how fast I think she is. I mean, she gets up by 5 race against the girls. I mean, my theory is it doesn't matter. I mean, well, I don't know why people argue about this in February. I mean, wait till, to me, I really don't. I mean, my whole theory is let her win the Santa Anita Oaks, then we'll talk about it. Like, that's like saying, starting to predict Breeders' Cup Classic horses right now. It doesn't matter. They'll all be hurt before October anyways. I mean, I just think that people, if and when she wins the Santa Anita Oaks, that's when you should start debating whether she should, because by that time, all those other variables that you're talking about will have been determined. We'll know if there's other speed. We'll know who's been hurt. We'll know all that other stuff that would make a logical decision to run in the Derby. And I don't know why they keep on asking the trainer and the owner in February if they should run in the Derby, because why would you make a decision? That'd be like asking a football coach in September, or in July, what's the first play he's going to run in September? Like, why wouldn't you wait to see who you're playing and what defense you're playing and then call the play in the huddle? I mean, I don't know why people are asking in February.
I guess because they have to first see her going against the boys in a prep to get the points to get in the race. But, it's something that I thought of during when Untappable ran against the boys too, and I'm wondering more and more. People always say in different scenarios in racing, and you see it a lot with, turf horses going on the dirt or the fillies going against the boys, they'll say, why not do it? You have nothing to lose. And with the fillies against the boys and turf horses on the dirt, I'm seeing more and more, there is no such thing as a situation where you have nothing to lose. If you have a filly and you never run him against the boys, but they're really good, people always say, well, she could have done it. If she would have ran against them, she could have maybe won. But the second that you run against them and lose, now you're exposed for what you are. I wonder if sometimes it's better to leave a little bit to the imagination from a business perspective than to potentially go against the boys, get pounded, and then people really, there is no such thing as there's nothing to lose, because when that happens, you definitely lose.
Well, I don't know really what you lose. You lose in racing, but it's not like her babies are going to be worth less, and they'd never sell her anyway. So I don't really know if you're losing anything there. I just think that everybody loves this fillies against the boys. And the reality is 90% of them lose. Like you just said, untappable loss. Zenyatta only won 1 out of 2. I mean, they lose. I mean, everybody loves the matchup until it actually happens. And yeah, Beholder won last year, but that was one time. And, you know, we don't know if she would have won the Breeders' Cup Classic or not. But like I say, it's after the fact, it's easier to say, well, I don't know if she would have won the Breeders' Cup. Like you say, the fun is in the mystery.
Yeah.
Because if you actually get out the data, again, going back to stats, they don't do very well. They just don't. And then every time they lose, all the people just kind of just mysteriously disappear. They just, all the people that wanted to see the matchup, that had to see the matchup, you never hear like, yeah, that was a bad thinking. Like, no, it's just like they want to just move on. You know, to me, so my opinion is let's wait a month. And then a lot of those variables that you talked about, but I just say the raw numbers. I mean, I've followed this for 20 years. There's been just as good of fillies in the past. People have short memories. Bayakoa was good. She got trounced. Passiana was good. She got trounced. I mean, these were grade 1, multiple winning, older mares that got beat. And they got beat bad. I mean, losing by 10 lengths and stuff. Like, it's never really pretty, actually. And you know, Rachel Alexandra won the Preakness, and she won against the older horses, the Woodward. But again, that was the Preakness and the Woodward. But a couple of years ago, we had 3 fillies in the Derby, and they got all trounced. I mean, they just got completely trounced. And we've seen other fillies just get, Lucas sent a filly there 4, 5, 6 years. Now, granted, Winning Colors won. But she had won the Santa Anita Derby by 8 lengths. So I guess that kind of had already proven that she could beat the boys. So I guess, to me, wait till April and then ask the question once. I mean, I guess I don't understand this constant asking of the question in February. I just don't think it adds to the discussion.
No, I wonder if it's just an ego thing. If a lot of people said last year, oh, she's the best, when at that point she clearly was, and then they want to just roll with it for their own ego's sake.
Well, you know, it's a bad analogy, but I mean, you'll get the analogy. You know, I remember about 3 months ago, everybody said, is Ronda Rousey the world's greatest athlete? And then she got her ass kicked and nobody said anything about her since. Yeah. I mean, before she got beat, you remember there's all this chatter about Ronda Rousey. I haven't heard her name once since she got beat. I mean, like people just, they immediately jump ship if she were to lose. And I think, you know, the other thing is normally the point of running in the Derby is the allure of the Triple Crown.
Yeah.
And nobody, I mean, winning the Belmont is just a whole nother story. So then if she wins the Derby, if she were to run in the Derby and win the Derby, what would everybody say 1 second after the race? You're going to the Preakness, aren't you? I mean, they won't let her just run in the Derby and not go to the Preakness.
Oh no, once she runs against the boys once, then you better be running against the boys every time, right? Otherwise you're copping out.
Otherwise you're copping out. So, I mean, from that standpoint, like, I think if they would be allowed to just run in the Derby and win it and not have to, but like the second she crossed the finish line, it would be, well, you're going to run in the Preakness. And then the second she loses any one race, people will say, well, why'd you run her against the boys? Like, it's just immediately the whole narrative switches. So, you know, I do think it was an impressive race. Now she's to the point now where, I mean, she's just up by 5 lengths out of the gate. There's nobody in her division can run with her. I mean, unless somebody just wants to get suicidal. So it is going to be interesting because we could, I mean, if she does run in the Oaks, she legitimately will be 1-9. And, you know, Rachel Alexandra won the race by like 20 lengths. And right now, I just can't imagine anybody really touching her. But so I guess she's a good horse. But I think just people forget all the times that the fillies lose and then they never bring it up again. You know, Harve de Grace a couple of years ago, I mean, got trounced in the Classic. You know, nobody brought it up. Asbury got trounced in the Classic. She'd won 12 in a row, if I remember right, against the fillies. Finally, they threw her in against the boys in the Breeders' Cup Classic. She got trounced. You know, I mean, and then nobody brought it up again. I mean, the history shows that it's not, you know, it's not very favorable in terms of the fillies. So that's that. My off-the-track topic is Pool 2 of the Future Wagers. And I know you had a day or so, but is there any horse that you think could be worth a wager? We're going to concentrate on, you know, we're going to eliminate the Nyquist and the More Spirits and the
Mhm.
Moyhay Men's, and any one of those other 21 horses that you could see winning.
Yeah, I did a blog about the Derby a couple weeks ago, and I specifically said that in Derby Wager Pool 2, I wanted to bet Brody's Cause because I felt like at the end of Pool 1, I think he finished at 21 to 1, and Exaggerator finished at 25 to 1. Obviously, those two have direct form lines in that they've raced against each other twice, and Brody's Cause has beaten Exaggerator twice. So I thought that the fact that Brody's Cause went off 4 points lower than Exaggerator already was ridiculous. They come here, and this is perfect. Brody's Cause is opening at 30 to 1, Exaggerator at 20 to 1, and I'm guessing it's for the reason that I was hoping, in that Exaggerator is running this weekend, so he's fresh in people's memory, whereas Brody's Cause isn't running until Tampa Bay Derby, so people just aren't really thinking about him right now. But for him, 30 to 1, that's a ridiculous price. He's one of these who he's going to want this extended trip. He has proven outstanding form, was third in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I don't know if people are forgetting that or whatnot, but I kind of had him pegged for a while for this pool as being the forgotten horse, and by the morning line at least, that certainly appears to be the case. We'll see how it shakes out when the pool itself opens, but that's the one horse I want badly is Brody's Cause.
I'm going to go with the horse that I think will be even longer. I mean, of course, a lot of these horses are listed at 30 and 50 to 1. I mean, some of them are literally 70. And I mean, but I like Dancing Candy. I think he's going to, it is what it is. He's an allowance winner and he's won 2 in a row. And I think now is the time to bet a horse like that. You either believe that he can do it. I mean, he's going to go to the San Felipe. If he were to somehow win the San Felipe, and not even if more Spirit's in the race or not, if he wins the San Felipe, he's probably 15 to 1 in Pool 3.
Yes.
And I don't think more Spirit's going to run in the San Felipe, so
No.
I think he's got a 50% chance of winning that race. So to me, I think he's going to be 40 to 1, 45 to 1, and I think everything's there. The pedigree, he has the looks. Trainer is a veteran conditioner that's trained a lot of horses over the years. And it's a speedy pedigree, but he's a nice looking horse. And I don't know, I like the 212 horse fields. He faced Uncle Lionel in his first race, had legitimate trouble. The maiden special weight on opening day of Santa Anita every year is a key race. So this horse has checked all the boxes for me, and I think he's going to be 40, 45 to 1. And I just think that's the type of horse I want.
Yeah, can't put you up there. He's on my fantasy team.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a few other horses. What's interesting is, Exaggerator doesn't run until Monday, so I think he's going to drift up as well. A horse like Whitmore runs on Monday. He could be 100 to 1, and all of a sudden he runs first or second on Monday, and that doesn't look too bad. The Southwest horses, you're kind of betting blind. I guess I'd rather have Whitmore at 100 to 1 than even Discreetness at 50 or 60 to 1.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that.
So it should be interesting. Of course, you can play the exactas. I think, there's a few horses in there that, they could go off that list pretty quickly. I mean, I'm not even sure Awesome Banners really, they've said that they're going to point for route races. Gettysburg runs Saturday, so you'll at least be able to see him run. Another horse you're betting kind of blindly on are the 2 Risen Star runners, Mo Tom and Tom's Ready. So if you kind of like that form, I think those horses could drift up, and they're listed at 50 to 1. So I don't think they're going to come out much.
Well, sometimes the exactas can become like really big overlays as well, so pay attention to those. Not necessarily picking 2 of the horses, but just picking out one horse you like and playing them over and under the field. Sometimes you still see really big prices on those exactas.
Well, the pools close on Sunday at 6. The Southwest is Monday. And Saturday is the Sam F. Davis. Next week, we're going to take a look at the Risen Star. That race is shaping up to be a 12, 13 horse field. We'll also have the Rachel Alexandra from the fairgrounds. So we'll get a line on, see if anybody ships in from Gulfstream to take on Stage Play and Midnight on Oconee. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.